Hey, good afternoon to you. It's 5:07 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. You can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Coming up on the program, our economist, EJ Antoni, joins us to help close out the year. A look back at the terrible Biden presidency and what's ahead for America as President Trump promises to revive the economy and to punish our adversaries when they're getting in our way. Let's see. We'll see what happens. We'll talk to EJ soon. Hey, while we're on the issue, I told you I wanted to play some audio from Victor Davis Hanson, who is incomparable. Love VDH. I've always had this theory that he should be the seat on Special Report, on the Fox News Channel Special Report. He should sit right next to Bret Baier every night. He should be that panelist. And the reason I think that is because, remember, Charles Krauthammer used to occupy that position right next to Bret. And, Charles was characteristically like the wisest guy at the table. And they would always, okay, Charles, what do you think? And Charles would give you this super wise answer. VDH does that. I think the only problem with that arrangement is that he lives in California, and I don't envision him physically being in D.C. to do that show every day. But he's right for it. I'm just glad he's out there speaking as much as he does, because he's such a wise observer with the long view, which is really important. He has all the context. He's a military historian. He has all the context for where we are in history and which versions of history it rhymes with. So he was on the Fox News Channel this week, and he was talking about Biden's delusions, because Biden, as you know, over the weekend it was reported, he doesn't really regret anything. He thinks he did a great job as president. The only thing he regrets is that he resigned from the race because he thinks he would have won in the end. So he regrets listening to Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and getting out of the race. And he also regrets that Merrick Garland didn't hurt Donald Trump more during the campaign. He was upset with the timing of the Justice Department's pursuit of Trump. He wanted it to start a little bit earlier in the hopes that they could get to a full-blown politically damaging trial during the campaign. Now, just like in all of Joe Biden's strategies, I'm not sure it would have worked out exactly how he planned. In fact, I think a trial of President Trump during the campaign would have only served to grow the margin of his victory. We saw that in New York, obviously, as Alvin Bragg and his ridiculous pursuit of Trump only resulted in more people supporting Trump. But that's Biden's regret. Biden's regret is resigning and Merrick Garland being the attorney general because he didn't hurt Trump enough, which is crazy. But Victor Davis Hanson responds to all of this, and he tells Kayleigh McEnany, who is filling in as a host on the Fox News Channel, that Biden is delusional.
He wanted to be FDR. Will history remember Biden kindly, Victor?
No, it's going to be just the opposite. He's very delusional. He feels that in all the areas he failed, on the border, on the economy, on crime, on Afghanistan and the Middle East, that if he had doubled down on those failures, they might have succeeded. And that's just delusional. I think what his problem is that he really does believe that because Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris lost to Donald Trump and he won once, largely because of radical changes in the voting from 70% in on election day to 70% mail-in on most states, he feels that therefore he could have won again, and there's no data to support that. So he's just delusional. It's kind of sad. He doesn't realize, Kayleigh, the original bargain, how he got nominated. He was a surrogate, wax and effigy for the Obama people and others in the left wing of that party to serve as a veneer. And when he could no longer do that, they deposed him. But they deposed him in the same manner they appointed him, by fiat. And so he lived by the nomination sword, and he died by the deposal sword. And he doesn't quite understand what his role was.
He's delusional. So imagine that. He ends his life both demented and delusional. And with a terrible record as president of the United States. Terrible record as president of the United States. It's crazy. And you also heard him reference the shenanigans with ballots in 2020. VDH was talking about that, and the circumstances by which Joe Biden becomes president. And I was reminded this week, we talked about it in the wake of Jimmy Carter's passing, but I haven't seen any coverage of this anywhere. You know that in Carter's post-presidency, one of the things he did in 2005 was he was a part of a commission to assess voting in the United States and how we do it, how we conduct voting in America. And that Carter-Baker Commission issued a public report, and in it, they had a couple of basic guidelines. One of them was photo ID for every voter. Photo ID for every voter. That's what Jimmy Carter signed on to, former Democrat president. Paper trail for every ballot. So whether or not you fill out a ballot on paper itself or you punch it into a machine, that it should print a ballot for you. Paper copies of everything, said Jimmy Carter. And then finally, in terms of the big items that were included in his recommendations, he said absentee ballots need to be stopped, basically, because they remain the largest source of potential voter fraud. Now, he didn't call for stopping them outright, but he was concerned. By the way, that phrase, largest source of potential voter fraud, that's Jimmy Carter's. Absentee ballots remain the largest source of potential voter fraud. So that was a warning from Jimmy Carter that absentee ballots are ripe for fraud. And of course, we've seen that in many cases that have been literally prosecuted for voter fraud and convicted for voter fraud with absentee ballots. And that is not just Democrats, that's Republicans too. Republicans, on occasion, have tried to steal elections in this manner. In other words, we need a secure election. And Jimmy Carter knew it. Jimmy Carter wasn't a good president. He failed on all sorts of things. Even Jimmy Carter knew that in order for Americans to have a successful election that they could believe in, they needed basics, like to prove their identity with a photo ID, to have a paper trail of their actual vote, and to stop mail-in ballot fraud. These are very basic, so simple, even Jimmy Carter understood them. And yet, almost no discussion on this subject. As we look back on Jimmy Carter's life, he did Habitat for Humanity. Okay, but what about this? What about this component? So as we discussed a little bit yesterday, and I'll just reemphasize today, Daniel Turner, we were chatting about this in part yesterday. If we would like to honor Jimmy Carter's legacy, then we all should agree to carry out his vision for American elections. That's it. Fix our elections. Jimmy Carter would want us to do that. Jimmy Carter would want us to do that. And the left, of course, has ran away from this entirely, and they'll just shoehorn Jimmy Carter into whatever their agenda is right now, as he lies in state coming up here in just a week. Really, there's a lot going on in Congress. A lot going on in Congress over the course of the next few days. One of the big things that's happening is we don't know who's going to be Speaker of the House yet. We still don't know who's going to be Speaker of the House. You heard Joe DeGenova talk about this earlier in the program. But Mike Johnson at the moment is not a sure thing to be Speaker of the House. Now, President Trump has given Mike Johnson his endorsement, that is really important. If you're Mike Johnson, that's exactly what you want. You want President Trump out there giving you what he refers to as his complete and total endorsement. President Trump argued this week that Republicans should, quote, not blow this great opportunity which we have been given. Speaker Mike Johnson is a good, hardworking, religious man, said President Trump. He will do the right thing, and we will continue to win, in all capital letters, W-I-N. Mike has my complete and total endorsement. For his part, Speaker Johnson responded, saying, thank you, President Trump. I'm honored and humbled by your support, as always. Together, we will quickly deliver on your America First agenda and usher in the new golden age of America. The American people demand and deserve that we waste no time. Let's get to work. Now, here's the thing with Mike Johnson. Mike Johnson has not been some amazing success story. So like Mike Johnson, yes, Mike Johnson, like, you know, Mike's everyone describes him as like a nice guy. He served, he's been a constitutional lawyer for many years. He's fought for religious liberty. He's been on the right side of so many issues in his career as an attorney. And he was a reliable Republican vote in Congress. But remember how he got here. After Kevin McCarthy was shown the door, Republicans couldn't agree on who their guy would be. They couldn't. So it just kept going vote after vote after vote after vote. And finally, the least objectionable person was Mike Johnson. That's how we arrived. That's how Mike Johnson became the Speaker of the House. We all lived through it. We all know that. And right now, Mike Johnson doesn't have every single Republican support, even in the wake of President Trump's endorsement, because there's a bunch of these Republicans are still angry, and I think reasonably so, about just the chaos that we just witnessed over the course of the last few weeks, for instance, where it was supposed to be a quick can kick, a continuing resolution that gets us to March so that Donald Trump could, carry out his spending vision for the country, became a 1,500-page pork-packed pile of garbage. And Mike Johnson was just telling everybody, you got to hold your nose and vote for it. All right, let's do it. Let's do it. What? That's not... Why is there all sorts of new stuff jammed into this, including pay raises for Congress? And so the American people mobilized. Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, a bunch of people got out there and they called this out as it was happening. And thankfully, the bill shrunk down to a much more constrained size, just 100 pages or so. But still, a disaster. This thing could have been a page long, and it should have been, and yet it wasn't. And so Mike Johnson, there's a bunch of Republicans who are like, you're just weak, man. Yes, he's got small margins, but show some strength. Show some backbone. Be forthcoming. Get out ahead of these messaging crises. Set the frame ahead of time. And so President Trump is doing Mike Johnson a favor here by coming out and endorsing him. Look, they've got a lot of business to get to. January 6th is when they handle the vote certification of the Electoral College count. That all has to get underway. They want a Speaker of the House in place. They want this to be an organized affair. And so under normal circumstances, if President Trump's agenda wasn't fully on the line, you could have a fight like this. Biden in office, Republicans, not able to move legislation. It's reasonable to have sort of these intra-party fights in order to determine the future of the country, to let our leaders know that we're watching, to hold them accountable. But now we're moving to a position where Republicans have the House. They have the Senate. They've got the White House. And they have a small window of time to get all of this done, to get anything done. And President Trump is asking Republicans right now, I need you to support Mike Johnson. Now, I hope this doesn't come back to bite Trump in the butt. Remember, Trump worked with Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan made all sorts of promises to him that he didn't fulfill, especially as related to the wall. So my guess is that President Trump, my hope is, that President Trump is giving this endorsement, but with a very clear message attached to it, at least behind the scenes, over the phone with Mike Johnson, or maybe in person at Mar-a-Lago. I need you there with me. And you can't sell me out. Don't make promises you can't keep. And I've made a lot of promises too. And guess who put Republicans in the driver's seat here? It's Trump. And so executing on his vision, the vision that voters chose, is of paramount importance. All right, more on this coming up. More EJ Antoni is going to be here. We're going to talk the economy. That's all in moments. All right, let's see here. Gary is calling in from Alexandria, line 2. Gary, you're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. Thanks for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to make a comment about the former President Carter piece that you just did, and his advice to require IDs, paper ballots, and limiting absentee ballots. It comes as no surprise to me, as a former Navy nuclear submariner, that his training would lead him to those types of conclusions. In the submarine force, a lot of the parts of and equipment that we use in the sub-safe area, you can trace that material all the way back to the mine where it was extracted. And maintenance really requires objective quality evidence. So having those kinds of parts in place for ballots, something as important as voting for the president of the United States, it comes as no surprise to me.
So, Gary, why is that so important for a submariner to have all of that information?
Well, if you found yourself in a situation where you had a part that failed, it's really important to be able to go back and identify the root cause of what the failure, what happened. Was it a maintenance problem? Was it a material problem? Was it personnel error? That sort of thing, because it really it impacts the safety of the sailors that are taking that submarine to sea and submerging, in that hostile environment. And so, it really goes back to the safety of the people on board the boat.
So if you think that voting is a very important act as a part of our constitutional republic, you'd want to do everything you could to safeguard it. And so if you have that training in a submarine, you might think, hey, a vote's pretty important too. Let's make sure that we have a paper trail in voter and photo ID and not have all of the fraud potential of these absentee ballots. That makes sense to you, huh? Doesn't it, Gary?
It does, 100%, Vince.
Yeah. Hey, Gary, thank you for your service. What a cool job. Not one I could ever do in a million years, but I'm impressed by everybody who gets inside a submarine and goes underwater. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's Gary in Alexandria. I hope he has a happy new year. I hope you do too. We're going to talk in a moment with EJ Antoni. He's our in-house economist. I've got some questions for him about the state of this economy and how things might change when Trump gets here. Hey, good afternoon to you. It is now 5:35. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. How's the economy doing? How's the economy doing at your house? Is it worse now? Well, that would fit the trend, as Americans everywhere are finding themselves so much poorer than they were when Donald Trump was in office. A lot of those Americans are eager for President Trump to return. Coming up on January 20th, now just 20 days away, if you can believe it. Isn't that so great? I tell you what, since the election, I've just felt so good waking up each morning like, thank goodness, at least a small break from all the craziness. Maybe a big break from all the craziness, I hope anyway. For more on the state of the economy and what to expect when President Trump gets back, let's bring in our economist, EJ Antoni. He's the in-house economist of this show and also an economist at the Heritage Foundation as a side job. EJ, good to talk to you today, sir.
Vince, thanks so much for having me. And you know what? The kind of improved sentiment that you're talking about, that's exactly what we're seeing, pretty much everywhere, whether we're looking at the consumer or we're looking at businesses. It's amazing how people's, you could say, forecast for the future or future sentiment has gone through the roof since November. Now, current conditions are still deteriorating, but in terms of people's hope, it's returning. Optimism
is way up. I want to talk about that in just a moment, but so let's start with the bad news first. I want to talk about the state of the economy under Joe Biden. There's a headline this week out of the Financial Times demonstrating that Americans are defaulting on their credit card loans at rates that haven't been seen since the Obama administration. There was an increase of 50% in the first 3 quarters of 2023 of credit card defaults. This strikes me as a very bad piece of data, EJ. Is it?
Oh, 100%. You're absolutely right, Vince. And, it really speaks to just how strapped the consumer is today. Again, current conditions are still deteriorating. People are still falling behind because the cost of living for most folks exceeds their actual income. And so people are having to do without. And let's put this in some perspective. A quarter, this is shocking, a quarter of renters report that they have to sometimes skip meals in order to pay their rent on time. I mean, that's the kind of thing you would expect from a third world country, not the United States of America. But look, if you import third world policies, expect third world results. And that's basically what we've had over the last 4 years.
Well, speaking of going hungry, one of the troubling economic data points is also that the food banks are undergoing record usage and requests. Isn't that right?
Yes, exactly. This was something you brought up the other day when I was listening to your show, where you talked about how not only are we seeing extraordinary numbers in terms of how many people are using food banks, but also the requests that are coming in. In other words, the demand for food at these food banks far exceeds how much is able to be supplied. Again, bread lines are something you expect in a third world country, not the United States of America. And what's really amazing, I think, over the last 4 years has been this huge divergence between the haves and the have-nots in this country, something that, Democrats always accuse Republicans of promoting, right? Creating this two-tiered society. Yes. The irony is that's what's happened under Biden. That's what his inflationary policies have caused. Folks who already owned homes, right, before Joe Biden got into office, those people have done just fine. The value of their homes have exploded. They typically have very low interest rate mortgages, but try getting a home today. Prices are through the roof, and the interest rates still remain stubbornly high. So those kinds of things are just perpetually unaffordable now.
Yeah, in fact, and obviously in the election, we saw President Trump gets elected, and voters who said that the economy is in bad shape, they went to Donald Trump by record margins over Kamala Harris. Crystal clear who people who are trying to figure out how to make it in this economy, who they prefer. This one other piece here that I wanted to hit with you. About this optimism that you started with. You talk about the forward-looking indicators. There's a report today in the Wall Street Journal. Actually, it's from December 27th, but just a few days ago. Headlined, "Help Wanted. U.S. Factories Seek Workers for the Nearshoring Boom." And they point out that there's a lot of American companies who right now are worried about sort of what the international picture is going to look like in the years ahead. And in order to safeguard themselves against all of that uncertainty, they are trying to restore manufacturing in the United States of America. They're bringing, they're building plants, they're hiring workers. They want to make it so that it's a sure thing. It's in your community. The product can get to you more quickly, and the costs can be predictable. The Wall Street Journal doesn't mention the name Trump in any of this, but when you hear a report like this, you can't help but think, well, that's because Trump's coming back, no?
Absolutely. And it's amazing how much the Biden administration talked about manufacturing, but all they really did was take taxpayer dollars to finance a bunch of schemes that were never profitable to begin with, which is why the private marketplace wasn't doing them. And they never actually did anything to really solve the underlying issues in manufacturing, not the least of which is the regulatory burden. People don't realize that every manufacturer is paying on average tens of thousands of dollars per worker in regulatory costs. And that's a key reason why so many firms have decided to engage in this corporate inversion where they ship jobs, they ship plants, they ship production overseas where they don't have to meet those different regulatory standards and where they don't have to pay those extremely high costs that put the American worker at a significant disadvantage. And now that we're seeing all of that getting reversed under an incoming Trump administration, we're going to see probably lower taxes on the corporate side and the individual side. Yep. We're probably going to see less of a regulatory burden, and we'll probably also see the president fight using tariffs and non-tariff barriers to prevent things like Chinese manufacturers from subsidizing and dumping cheap product onto the American marketplace, where they always end up putting the American producer out of work.
Talk about tariffs, if you will. The left has made it out to be, or at least when they were running against Trump, despite the fact that they kept in place a lot of the Chinese tariffs that President Trump put in place, they made it out to be that, that's just a way to raise costs on American consumers, which is hilarious coming from the left because that's their entire program, raising costs on American consumers. But when they say that, what is actually going to happen? How, you heard from President Trump. He's talked about his agenda. He's been president before. How does Donald Trump use tariffs?
So there's two important points to make here, Vince. First is the fact that there's a difference between using using tariffs as a tactic versus using it as a strategy, right? In war, it's the difference between tactical bombing and strategic bombing. And so the idea here is not that we're simply going to do like we did in the late 1920s, early 1930s, where you had these blanket tariffs anywhere and everywhere that were an absolute disaster and sparked trade wars where the American consumer had no leverage. Instead, Trump is being hyper-focused and is using these tariffs in specific instances where he knows we have leverage. He's effectively wielding the American consumer's purchasing power like a financial weapon on the world stage. He's done this particularly well with Mexico and with Canada. And so he's able to use the threat of tariffs in that way, and he typically doesn't even have to follow through on them. So that's the first point. But the second point is, we really need, I think, especially economists, we really need to get over this idea that somehow international trade is sacrosanct. Why is it we always talk about free trade, right? I'm a free trade economist. Okay, that's great. You want to be a free trade economist. Why are you only free trade when it comes to international trade? What about domestic trade? If we're going to fight so hard to not have any taxes on goods that are produced overseas, why shouldn't we fight just as hard to not have any taxes on goods that are manufactured here at home? I don't want to give an unfair advantage to our foreign manufacturers. And it's not that we hate foreigners. We just love Americans more. I want to promote American manufacturing. I want to promote American ingenuity, American production, American productivity. So if we're going to really talk about being free trade, I think we need to focus on first lowering taxes here at home before we talk about how we have to bring down taxes on people abroad.
Yes, and also I've noticed that people who reflexively just say, I'm for free trade, I'm not for tariffs, they don't really raise any concern with the fact, as you pointed out, that China subsidizes products in order to undercut the American market. They don't point out the intellectual property theft that's going on there. They don't point to the slave labor that's used in order to mitigate the costs in order to hold them down here in the United States. It's like I'm for free trade. What does that even mean? That's like saying that you're for competitive swimming and then looking the other way when Leah Thomas is beating all the women. Like, what? That's not a fair match.
That's exactly right. China is the Leah Thomas of manufacturing. That's a great analogy, Vince. So, and look, the other thing to remember is the fact that, and this is something that the first Trump administration, I think, focused on not enough, and I'm hoping that the incoming Treasury Secretary will focus on a lot more, is the fact that China constantly engages in currency manipulation, again, to give their producers an unfair advantage on the world stage. And now there's a lot of ways that you can pretty easily account for this, such as looking at the price of gold in dollars versus the price of gold in Chinese yuan, in the renminbi. But whatever the case, whatever metric you want to use, if you observe how much are they devaluing their currency, you can then see how much of an unfair advantage they're basically giving their producers on the world stage. And so that's something I think the next Trump administration is going to take an even closer look at than they did the first go around. And then the other thing, real quick, just returning to the tax part of this whole discussion, is the fact that we actually tax manufactured goods here in the United States at a higher rate than the exact same thing produced overseas. This is why some economists want to implement something called a border adjustment tax. And, there's lots of different ways to do this, but the fact of the matter is you need reforms in the tax code, like what we saw in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, but even more so, you need additional reforms to ensure that we're not putting domestic producers at an unfair tax advantage. There's no reason we should be, subsidizing production overseas and penalizing it here at home.
All right. How quickly do you anticipate a shift in the economy? Obviously, we're seeing some of the components now because everyone's expecting Trump to arrive, so people are kind of building in their expectations. But how quickly do you expect President Trump and company to change things?
Well, in some instances, like you said, just the hope of him coming in is already causing an increase in economic activity. We've seen in several of the Federal Reserve manufacturing surveys at the different regional banks around the country where they've reported respondents saying there was an uptick in new orders literally the week after the election because people are so much more optimistic. However, again, optimism of the future doesn't pay today's bills. And so as things continue deteriorating, this administration is really getting handed a huge mess.
Yes.
That's especially true in the labor market. The Philly Fed just came out a few weeks ago with a report that estimates in the second quarter of this year, we actually lost jobs. So we didn't gain 650,000 like the Biden administration told us. No, we lost jobs apparently in that quarter. So again, things are nowhere near as robust as we've been led to believe.
Yes.
This administration is really getting handed a mess. That's why so many millions of Americans voted for him. They want the mess cleaned up. So how quickly can he actually get it cleaned up? Some things are going to take longer than others. One of the things that I think will be very quick is actually energy. Normally that takes a long time, but over the last several years, what we have seen as a result of the Biden administration's higher tax and higher regulatory environment within the energy sector has been a shuttering of wells. In other words, the infrastructure is still there. The pipelines are there. The wellheads are there, but everything has been mothballed. Well count has dropped pretty dramatically over the last few years. And so if you can actually reduce the regulatory burden, and if you can reduce the tax burden, a lot of which can be done simply through executive order, since that's how the problem was created in the first place, you can get that production back online relatively quickly, probably within 6 months, again, because you don't have to actually build any infrastructure.
Right.
Everything is already there.
And energy is one of those sectors where forward-looking certainty does have a dramatic increase on prices, right?
Exactly. I mean, even if you just look at how we trade energy, you're not trading a barrel you're not trading a barrel today on the New York Stock Exchange. You're trading in futures. In other words, you're looking at delivery for a barrel of oil many, many days, many weeks actually in advance. So you're absolutely right. It is inherently a forward-looking industry. And one of the things, again, that we have seen with President Trump getting reelected has been an increased amount of talk in the C-suite about bringing major pieces of equipment. We're talking things like cracking towers at refineries, bringing major pieces of equipment back online. These are things that take months to get ready, even if they've already been built. They take months to get ready. They take months to shut down. And so they're looking for a much more positive regulatory and tax environment. And as you said, they're already responding to it, Vince, because of how forward-looking the industry is. EJ
Antoni is our in-house economist and the real deal when it comes to looking at all the economic data, the best in the country. EJ, have a very happy New Year. Thank you for your time today.
Vince, happy New Year to you and yours.
Thank you, sir. President Trump closing the year with this message. Take a listen.
Project the winner of the presidential race. Donald Trump wins the presidency. What started off as unlikely, impossible, is now reality.
I will fight for you with every breath in my body, and I will never, ever let you down.
We have a president who actually fulfilled the promises he made during the campaign. Securing the border to foreign policy.
He now has a record as president that's pretty damn impressive. Breaking news out of Palm Beach,
The FBI has executed an unprecedented search warrant at President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. The former president has both sides of the political aisle up in arms.
It is a dangerous and unstable moment in American history.
The Justice Department has just indicted former President Donald Trump.
For 7 years, they hated him, they targeted him, they hunted him.
This is the epitome of the abuse of the prosecutorial power to preempt political decisions.
I never thought anything like this could happen in America. The only crime that I have committed is to fearlessly defend our nation from those who seek to destroy it. The more that a broken system tells you that you're wrong, the more certain you should be that you must keep pushing ahead. They want to take away my freedom because I will never let them take away your freedom. They want to silence me because I will never let them silence you. They're not coming after me, they're coming after you, and I just happen to be standing in their way, and I will never be moving. On November 5th, 2024, justice will be done. We will take back our country, and we will make America great again. America will always rise to every challenge. and overcome every danger.
Donald Trump seems to always get stronger when challenged. These types of things, I think, give him strength.
When I'm reelected, I will totally obliterate the deep state.
All right, a great message for President Trump to close out the year. You can see the whole thing on his Truth Social today. Great one. It has been such an awesome year with you. Thank you for that. Please have a safe night tonight and a very happy new year. Can't wait to talk to you and work with you through the next one. It's going to be great. Can't wait for it. Have a great night.